The Thought War by Paul Macauley. Listen. Don't try to speak. Don't try to move. Listen to me. Listen to my story. Everyone remembers their first time. The first time they saw a zombie and knew it for what it was. But my first time was one of the first times ever. It was so early in the invasion that I wasn't sure what was happening. So early we didn't yet call them zombies. It was in the churchyard of St. Pancras Old Church in the fabulous, long-lost city of London. Oh, it's still there, more or less. It's one of the few big cities that didn't get hit in the last crazy days of global spasm. But it's lost to us now, because it belongs to them. Anyway, St. Pancras Old Church was one of the oldest sites of Christian worship in Europe. There'd been a church there, in one form or another, for 1,500 years. And although the railway lines to St. Pancras Station ran hard by its north side, it was an isolated and slightly spooky place, full of history and romance. Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin was buried there, and it was at her graveside that her daughter, who later wrote Frankenstein, first confessed her love to the poet Shelley, and he to her. In his first career as an architect's assistant, the novelist Thomas Hardy supervised the removal of bodies when the railway was run through part of the churchyard, and yet some of the displaced gravestones around an ash tree was later named after him. I lived nearby. I was a freelance science journalist then. When I was working at home and the weather was good, I often ate my lunch in the old churchyard. That's where I was when I saw my first zombie. I can see that you don't understand much of this. It's all right. You are young. Things had already changed when you were born, and much that was known then is unknowable now. But I'm trying to set a mood, an emotional tone, because it's how you respond to the mood and emotions of my story that's important. That's why you have to listen carefully. That's why you're gagged and bound and wired to my machines. Listen. It was a hot day in June in that ancient and hallowed ground. I was sitting on a bench in the sun-dappled shade of Hardy's ash tree, eating an egg and cress sandwich, and thinking about the article I was writing on cosmic rays when I saw him. It looked like a man, anyway. A ragged man in a long black raincoat, ropey hair down around his face as he limped toward me with a slow and stiff gait, halting and raising his head and looking all around, then shambling on, till his black coat dragging behind. I didn't pay much attention to him at first. I thought he was a vagrant. We're all vagrants now. In the long ago, most of us had homes and families, and only the most unfortunate, slaves to drink or drugs, long souls brought down by misfortune or madness, lived on the streets. Vagrants were drawn to churchyards by the quietness and sense of ancient sanctuary, and there was a hospital at the west end of the churchyard of old St. Pancras, where they went to fill their prescriptions, get treatments for illness or injury. So he wasn't an unusual sight, shambling beneath the trees in a slow and wavering march past Mary Godwin's grave towards Hardy's ash and the little church. Then a dog began to bark. A woman with several dogs on leads and several more trotting freely called a little wire-haired terrier that was dancing around the vagrant in a fury of excitement. 2 more dogs ran up to him and began to bark too, the coats bristling with ears laid flat. I saw the vagrant stop and shake back the ropes from his face and look all around. For the first time, I saw his face. It was dead white and broken, like a vase shattered and badly mended. My first thought was that he'd been in a bad accident, something involving glass or industrial acids. Then I saw that what I had thought were ropes of matted hair were writhing with slow and awful independence of the tentacles of a sea creature. Saw that the tattered raincoat wasn't a garment. It was his skin, flung stiff and black around him like the wings of a bat. The dog woman started screaming. She'd had a clear look at the vagrant, too. Her dogs pranced and howled and whined and barked. I was on my feet. So were the handful of other people who'd been spending a lazy lunch hour in the warm and shady churchyard. One of them must have had the presence of mind to call the police, because almost at once, or so it seemed, there's a wail of a siren and a prickle of blue lights beyond the churchyard fence, and 2 policemen in their yellow stab vests came running. They stopped as soon as they saw the vagrant. One tucked into a radio clip to his vest. The other began to round everyone up and lead us to the edge of the churchyard. and all the while the vagrant stood at the center of a seething circle of maddened dogs, looking about, clubbed hands held in a gesture of supplication. A hole yawned redly in his broken white face, shaped hoarse and wordless sounds of distress. More police came. The road outside the churchyard was blocked off. A helicopter clattered above the tops of the trees. Men in hazmat suits entered the park. One of them carried a rifle. By this time, everyone who'd been in the park was penned against the police van. The police wouldn't answer our questions. We were speculating in a very calm and English way about terrorism. That was the great fear in the long ago. Ordinary men moved among us, armed with explosives and hateful certainty. We all started when we heard the first shot. The chorus of barks doubled, redoubled. A dog ran pell-mell out of the churchyard gate, and a marksman shot it there on the road, and the woman who still had the leashes of several dogs cried out. Men in hazmat suits separated us, made us walk, one by one, through a shower frame they'd assembled on the pavement, made us climb, one by one, in our wet and stinking clothes, into cages in the backs of police vans. I was in quarantine for 100 days. When I was released, the world had changed forever. I'd watched it change on TV, and now I was out in it. Soldiers everywhere on the streets. Security checks and sirens and a constant low-level dread. Lynch mobs. Public hangings and burnings. 10 or 12 in London alone, each and every day. Quarantined areas cleared and barricaded. Invaders everywhere. But not everyone was calling them zombies. We knew they weren't our own dead, come back to walk the earth, of course. That's what they most looked like. More and more of them were appearing at random everywhere in the world. They were growing more and more like us. The first zombies had been only approximations, barely human in appearance, with brain and lungs and a heart, little else by way of internal organs, like slabs of muscle that stored enough electrical energy to keep them alive for a day or so. But they were changing, evolving, adapting. After only 100 days, they were almost human. The first to seem monstrous and pitiful. Now they looked like dead men walking, animated showroom dummies. Almost human, but not quite. After I was released from quarantine, I went back to my trade, interviewing scientists about the invasion, writing articles. There were dozens of theories, no real evidence to support any of them. The most popular was that we had been targeted for invasion by aliens from some far star. The zombies were like the robot probes we had dispatched to other planets and moons in the solar system, growing ever more sophisticated as they sent back information to their controllers. Made a kind of sense, though it didn't explain why. Although they had plainly identified us as the dominant species, the controllers didn't try to contact us. Experiments of varying degrees of cruelty showed that the zombies were intelligent and self-aware. Yet they ignored us unless we tried to harm or kill them. Otherwise, they simply walked among us. No matter how many were detected and destroyed, there were always more of them. The most unsettling news came from an old and distinguished physicist, a Nobel laureate, who told me that certain of the fundamental physical constants seemed to be slowly and continuously changing. He'd been trying to convey the urgent importance of this to the government, as I discovered when I tried to use my contacts to bring his findings to the attention of ministers, members of parliament, and civil servants. The government was too busy dealing with the invasion and the consequences of the invasion. There was an old and hopeful lie that an alien invasion would cause the nations of Earth to set aside their differences and unite them against the common enemy. It didn't happen. Instead, global paranoia and suspicion ratcheted up daily. The zombies were archetypal invaders from within. Hatreds and prejudices that once had been cloaked in diplomatic evasions were now nakedly expressed. Several countries used the invasion as an excuse to attack troublesome minorities or accuse old enemies of complicity with the zombies. There were genocidal massacres and brush fire wars across the globe. Iran attacked Iraq and Israel with nuclear weapons. What was left of Israel wiped out the capital cities of its neighbors. India attacked Pakistan. China and Russia fought along their long border. The United States invaded Cuba, and Venezuela tried to close its borders with Canada and Mexico and took sides with China against Russia. And so on and so on. The zombies didn't have to do anything to destroy us. We were tearing ourselves apart. We grew weaker as we fought each other, The zombies grew stronger by default. In Britain, everyone under 30 was called up for service in the armed forces, and then everyone under 40 was called up too. 3 years after my first encounter, I found myself in a troop ship at the tail end of a convoy wallowing through the Bay of Biscay towards the Mediterranean. Huge columns of zombies were straggling out of the Sahara Desert. We were supposed to stop them, slaughter them. As we approached the Straits of Gibraltar, someone, it was never clear who, dropped a string of nuclear bombs on zombies massing in Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, and Egypt. On our ships, we saw the flashes of the bombs light the horizon. An hour later, we were attacked by the remnants of the Libyan and Egyptian air forces. Half our fleet were sunk. The rest limped home. Britain's government was still intact, more or less, but everyone was in the armed forces now, defending ourselves from the zombies and from waves of increasingly desperate refugees from the continent. There was a year without summer. Snow in July. Crops failed, and despite rationing, millions died of starvation and cold. There were biblical plagues of insects, and all the old sicknesses came back. And still the zombies kept appearing. They looked entirely human now. It was easy to tell what they were, because they weren't starving or haunted or mad. We kept killing them, and they kept coming. They took our cities from us. We fled into the countryside and regrouped. They came after us, and we broke into smaller groups, and still they came after us. We tore ourselves apart trying to destroy them. Yet we still didn't understand them. We didn't know where they were coming from, what they were, what they wanted. We grew weaker as they grew stronger. Do you understand me? I think that you do. Your pulse rate and pupil dilation and skin conductivity all show peaks at the key points of my story. That's good. That means you might be human. Listen. Let me tell you what the distinguished old physicist told me. Let me tell you about the observer effect and the Boltzmann brains. In the 19th century, the Austrian physicist Ludwig Boltzmann developed the idea that the universe could have arisen from a random thermal fluctuation, like a flame popping into existence, an explosion from nowhere. Much later, other physicists suggested that similar random fluctuations could give rise to anything imaginable, including conscious entities in any shape or form. Boltzmann brains. It was one of those counterintuitive and mostly theoretical ideas that helped cosmologists shape their models of the universe and how we fit into it. It helped to explain why the universe was hospitable to the inhabitants of an undistinguished planet, of an average star, and a not very special galaxy, in a group of 1 million such. And that group of galaxies, 1 of millions more. We are typical, ordinary. And because we are ordinary, our universe is ordinary too. Because there is no objective reality beyond that which we observe. Because according to quantum entanglements, pairs of particles share information about each other's quantum states, even when distance and timing means that no signal can pass between them. Because observation is not passive. Because our measurements influence the fundamental laws of the universe. They create reality. But suppose other observers outnumbered us. What would happen then? The probability of even one Boltzmann brain appearing in the 14 billion years of the universe's history is vanishingly small. Perhaps something changed the local quantum field and made it more hospitable to them. Perhaps the density of our own consciousness attracted them, as the mass of a star changes the gravitational field that attracts passing comets. Perhaps the inhabitants of another universe are interfering with our universe. Perhaps the zombies are their avatars. Boltzmann brains that pop out of the energy field and change our universe to suit their masters simply because they think differently and see things differently. That was what the old physicist told me in the long ago. He had evidence too. Simple experiments that measured slow and continuous changes in the position of the absorption lines of calcium and helium and hydrogen in the sun spectrum, in standards of mass and distance, and in the speed of light. He believed that the fundamental fabric of the universe was being altered by the presence of the zombies, and that those changes were reaching back into the past and forward into the future, just as a pebble dropped into a pond will send ripples spreading out to either side. Every time he checked the historical records of the position of these absorption lines, They agreed with his contemporaneous measurements, even though those measurements were continuously changing. We are no longer what we once were. We're not aware of having changed, because our memories have been changed too. Do you see why this story is important? It's not just a matter of my survival, even the survival of the human species. It's a matter of the survival of the entire known universe. The zombies have already taken so much from us. The few spies and scouts who have successfully mingled with them and escaped to tell the tale, so they're demolishing and rebuilding our cities. Day and night they ebb and flow through the streets in tidal masses, like army ants or swarming bees, under the flickering auroras of strange energies. They are as unknowable to us as we are to them. Listen, this is still our world. That it is still comprehensible to us, we can still survive in it, suggests that the zombies have not yet won an outright victory. It suggests that the tide can be turned. We have become vagrants scattered across the face of the earth, and now we must come together and go forward together. But the zombies have become so like us that we can't trust any stranger. We can't trust someone like you, who stumbled out of the wilderness into our sanctuary. That's why you must endure this test. Like mantids or spiders, we must stage fearful courtship rituals before we can accept strangers as our own. I want you to survive this. I really do. There are not many of us left, and you are young. You can have many children, many little observers. Listen, this world can be ours again. It's been many years since the war. Its old beauty is returning. Now that civilization has been shattered, it has become like Eden again. Tell me, is a world as wild and clean and beautiful as this not worth saving? Was the sky never so green? The grass never so blue?